Some curses are real, and Gaiola Island is one of them. He bought an island to escape his past. It was waiting for him. Every owner of Gaiola Island has faced tragedy. Antonio Rossi thought he was the exception. The price for paradise was his sanity. The sea off Posillipo was a liar's paradise. That's what Antonio Rossi thought, standing on the pebbled shore of mainland Naples, squinting at the silhouette in the mist. The Tyrrhenian sun, so bold and brazen over the city, seemed to shy away from Gaiola Island. It was a place of two halves, this island, or rather, two islands connected by a slender, impossibly high stone bridge that arched over a deep, azure channel. The whole complex was no bigger than a large villa itself, a collection of crumbling, sun-bleached buildings clinging to the rock as if for dear life. To the tourists snapping photos from the cliffside path, it was a picturesque ruin, a romantic folly. To Antonio, who had just signed the deeds making him its latest, foolish owner, it was a promise. A promise of silence, of isolation, of a life finally wrested from the grubby hands of a world that had taken too much from him. His wife, Sofia, stood beside him, her hand a cold weight in his. "It's so quiet," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The word was meant to be a comfort, a balm after the relentless noise of their life in Milan, the creditors' calls, the hissed accusations from former partners, the pitying murmurs at their daughter's funeral. But here, the quiet felt different. It wasn't an absence of sound, but a presence. It was the low, guttural hum of the sea sucking at the rocks, the mournful cry of gulls that sounded too much like a child's sob. "That's the point, my love," Antonio said, squeezing her hand, trying to inject a confidence he didn't feel. "A fresh start. No memories. Just us." He had made his fortune in tech, a self-made man who believed in data, logic, and the tangible. The stories about Gaiola, the cursed island, were just that to him, stories. A convenient narrative spun from coincidence and the Mediterranean love of drama. The Swiss businessman who went bankrupt. Poor investments. The Italian industrialist who lost his family in a car crash after buying it. A tragic accident. The previous owner, reclusive German baron, found floating face down in the channel between the two halves of the island. An old man, a weak heart, a misstep. Antonio had dismissed it all. He'd gotten the place for a song, a fact that should have been his first warning. The boatman, a grizzled old salt named Gennaro with skin like tan leather, refused to take them all the way to the island's small dock. He dropped them at the end of the submerged causeway that connected it to the mainland, treacherous path of slick stones just beneath the waves. "The jettatura is strong there, signore," Gennaro muttered, crossing himself quickly. The evil eye. You don't build a villa on the ruins of a temple to Venus without paying a price. She was a fickle goddess. And before that, they say the philosopher Virgil himself practiced his dark magics here. Trapped a spirit in a bottle and threw it into the sea to calm the storms. Some say the bottle broke right here. He gestured vaguely at the dark water beneath the arching bridge. Antonio laughed, a sharp, hollow sound. Virgil was a poet, not a wizard. And Venus is a myth. I pay for facts, Gennaro, not fairy tales. Gennaro just shook his head, his eyes dark with a pity that infuriated Antonio. Facts, signore? The sea here is full of facts. They just aren't the kind you want to hear. He pushed off without another word, leaving them standing on the slippery causeway, their luggage at their feet. The villa itself was a beautiful corpse. The white stucco was peeling, revealing the sickly grey stone beneath. Windows stared out like the empty eye sockets of a skull. The air inside was cold and heavy with the smell of salt, damp, and something else, something faintly metallic, like old blood. Their footsteps echoed through the cavernous, empty rooms, the sound swallowed by the oppressive silence that seemed to push back against any noise they made. Sofia drifted from room to room, her fingers trailing through the thick dust on the windowsills. She was a ghost of the woman she'd been, her vibrant energy extinguished with the loss of their little girl, Julia. The cancer had been swift and merciless. Antonio had fought it with every lira he had, flying in specialists, funding experimental treatments. In the end, all his money, all his logic, had been useless. Buying the island was his last, desperate gamble, to buy a world without reminders. "This could be the kitchen," Sofia said, her voice flat. "The light is good." Antonio came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her thin shoulders. She didn't lean into him. She was rigid, a statue slowly turning to salt. "We'll make it a home, Sofia. You'll see." That first night, the silence was broken. Antonio was jolted awake by a sound, a low, rhythmic thumping that seemed to come from deep within the house. Thump, thump, thump. Like a slow, heavy heartbeat. He sat up, his own heart hammering against his ribs. Sofia slept on, undisturbed, her breathing shallow. He slipped out of bed, the cold stone floor biting at his bare feet. He followed the sound through the dark hallways, his flashlight beam a frantic, darting eye. It led him down a narrow, winding staircase he hadn't noticed before, into a cellar. The air here was frigid and thick with the smell of the sea. The thumping was louder here, emanating from the far wall. It was made of rough, ancient-looking stone, different from the rest of the foundation. As he shone his light on it, the sound stopped abruptly. In the sudden, profound silence, he heard something else, a faint, wet, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across a wet floor, coming from the other side of the wall. "Hello," he called out, his voice trembling. The dragging stopped. Only the drip-drip of water and the frantic pulse in his ears answered him. He fled back to their bedroom, convincing himself it was the plumbing, the old bones of the house settling, the sea echoing in some strange acoustic flaw. He was a man of facts. He repeated this to himself like a mantra until sleep, fitful and thin, reclaimed him. The days bled into one another, each one a little grayer, a little colder than the last. The magnificent views of the Bay of Naples and Mount Vesuvius began to feel like a painting they were trapped inside of. The colors seemed to leach away, leaving behind a world of muted blues and grim grays. Sofia spent most of her time in what she called the sunroom, though the sun rarely seemed to penetrate its grimy windows. She was painting again, but her canvases were disturbing. They were all variations of the same theme, a small, dark-haired girl, her back turned, standing at the edge of the water, looking out to sea. The girl was always faceless, but Antonio knew with a sick certainty that it was Julia. He tried to work, setting up a satellite internet connection and a modern office in one of the tower rooms. But the connection was erratic, cutting out at crucial moments. Files corrupted. Emails vanished into the digital ether. The financial security he had fought so hard to rebuild began to feel precarious again. A major investment fell through due to a communication error he could have sworn wasn't his fault. A partner in New York suddenly backed out of a deal, citing unforeseen circumstances and a bad feeling. The tendrils of the island's curse, as Gennaro would have it, were stretching out across the ocean, tangling his affairs. And the sounds continued. The thumping in the cellar became a nightly occurrence. Sometimes, it was joined by whispers. Not words, exactly, but sibilant, sighing sounds that seemed to coil through the hallways like spectral serpents. They sounded like they were just outside the door, or right behind his head. He started drinking heavily, the local Lacrima Christi wine doing little to christen his eyes with tears of joy, but instead fueling a simmering paranoia. He began to see things, too. Fleeting movements in his peripheral vision, a shadow detaching itself from a deeper shadow, a pale face at a window that was empty when he turned to look. Once, he saw a little girl in a white dress run laughing across the arching bridge outside. His heart stopped. Julia, he choked out, stumbling after her. But when he got to the bridge, it was empty, save for a single, child's hair ribbon, faded and salt-stained, tangled in the iron railing. When he brought it back to show Sofia, she just stared at it with a vacant expression. She never liked that color, was all she said, before returning to her canvas. The isolation became absolute. Gennaro stopped coming altogether, even when summoned. Their supplies ran low. Antonio was forced to make the treacherous walk across the submerged causeway to the mainland, the water clawing at his knees, a sense of profound dread making his skin crawl. The people in the small village on the coast were polite but distant. They wouldn't meet his eyes. They called him Illinois Signore dell'Isola, the Lord of the Island, and the title felt like a sentence. One evening, he found Sofia standing at the very edge of the cliff on their side of the island, her bare toes curling over the precipice. The wind whipped her hair around her face, and for a terrifying moment, he thought she was going to let it take her. "Sofia!" he yelled, grabbing her arm and pulling her back. She turned to him, and her eyes were clear for the first time in weeks. But the clarity was worse than the vacancy. It was filled with a terrifying knowledge. "She's here, Antonio," Sofia whispered, her voice raw. "Julia is here. I can feel her. She's so cold." "She's dead, Sofia," he shouted, the words tearing out of him, harsh and cruel. "She's gone. This place is it's just an old house. It's playing tricks on your mind." Sofia just smiled, a thin, ghastly expression. "Is it? Then who is she talking to in the cellar?" A chill, colder than the sea spray, shot down Antonio's spine. "What are you talking about?" "I hear her. At night. She's talking to the other one. The one who lives in the water under the bridge." That night, a storm descended upon the Bay of Naples. It wasn't a natural storm. The sky turned a bruised, sickly green, and the wind didn't howl, it screamed, a high-pitched, agonized sound that seemed to have words in it. The sea, usually a placid blue, became a churning, black fury, hurling itself against the rocks of Gaiola as if trying to tear the island down to its foundations. The power, what little there was of it, died instantly. They were plunged into a darkness so complete it felt solid. Antonio lit all lamps, their guttering flames casting frantic, dancing shadows that seemed to mock them. The thumping from the cellar was no longer rhythmic, it was a frantic, violent pounding, as if something was trying to beat its way through the stone wall. And then the whispers started. Not from the hallways this time, but from inside the room with them. They swirled around Antonio and Sofia, a cacophony of hissing, pleading, angry voices. He clapped his hands over his ears, but the sound was inside his head. "Stop it!" he roared. Sofia was on her knees, rocking back and forth. "She's calling me, Antonio. She's so lonely." "It's not her," he screamed, his sanity fraying like a rotten rope. "It's this damned island. It's a sickness." He stumbled towards the cellar door, a wild, irrational plan forming in his mind. He would break down the wall. He would see what was there. He would prove it was just rats, or water, or nothing at all. He seized a heavy iron fire poker from the hearth and staggered down the winding stairs. The cellar was freezing, His breath plumed in the lamplight. The thumping was deafening now, a brutal, mindless hammering. He could see the wall vibrating with each impact. He raised the poker. "Whatever you are, show yourself," he bellowed, and brought the poker down on the ancient stones. A crack appeared. Not a crack in the mortar, but a fissure in the stone itself. A black, viscous liquid began to seep from it, smelling of brine and decay. The thumping stopped. The whispers died away. In the sudden, absolute silence, the dragging sound returned. It was closer now. Right on the other side of the wall. With a final, desperate heave, Antonio struck the wall again. A large chunk of stone fell away, revealing a black opening. The stench that poured out was overwhelming, the smell of a deep-sea trench, of things that had never seen the sun, of ancient rot. He held the lamp up to the hole. And he saw. It wasn't a room. It was a cavern, a natural grotto that opened out into the sea beneath the channel of the bridge. The water inside was black and stagnant. And there, half submerged in the water, was a shape. It was large, amorphous, a tangle of pale, slick limbs that were neither human nor fish. It had long, flowing hair the color of bleached seaweed, and its skin was covered in a phosphorescent sheen that pulsed with a faint, sickly light. But its face was a shifting, terrible canvas. For a moment, he saw the tormented features of the Swiss businessman. Then it morphed into the agonized grimace of the German baron. Then it was Julia, his daughter, her face bloated and blue, her eyes milky white. It was the island. It was the curse. It was the fickle spirit Virgil was said to have trapped, the hungry presence that had fed on the grief and ruin of every owner, growing fat on their despair. The thing that wore his daughter's face turned its head towards him. Its mouth opened, but the sound that came out was the collective scream of every soul it had consumed, a wave of pure, undiluted anguish that slammed into Antonio, shattering the last of his reason. He dropped the lamp. It shattered, and the flames, greedy for the spilt oil, leapt up, licking at the damp walls. He didn't care. He was already screaming, a raw, continuous sound that was torn from the depths of his soul. He turned and fled, scrambling up the stairs on his hands and knees. Sofia was gone from the main room. The front door was wide open, swinging wildly in the storm. He stumbled out into the tempest. The rain felt like needles on his skin. The wind tried to pluck him from the ground. He saw her. Sofia was standing on the high, arching bridge that connected the two parts of the island. And she wasn't alone. A small figure in a white dress stood beside her, holding her hand. It was Julia. She turned and looked at him, and her face was no longer a mask of death, but was filled with a profound, unearthly sadness. She pointed a tiny finger towards the churning water below the bridge. "She's waiting for you, Antonio," Sofia's voice carried on the wind, serene and terrible. "She's been so lonely. But she has me now. She needs you, too. To be a family again." "Sofia, no," he screamed, fighting his way towards the bridge. "It's a trick. It's not her." But he knew, with a certainty that froze the blood in his veins, that it didn't matter. The thing in the grotto had shown him his daughter's face because it was the key to his soul. It had used Julia's memory to break Sofia, and now it was using Sofia to break him. He reached the base of the bridge as Sofia, with a final, beatific smile, stepped off the edge, the small figure in white stepping with her. They fell, not like stones, but like feathers, swallowed by the black water without a splash. Antonio's scream was lost in the storm. He collapsed onto the bridge, the rain washing his tears away as soon as they fell. He had lost everything. His fortune was in ruins, his wife was gone, and the memory of his daughter was now a poisoned, monstrous thing. The curse had won. It had taken everything, and it had left him with nothing but the crushing weight of his own failure and the chilling knowledge of what lurked in the heart of his home. The fire he had started in the cellar was snuffed out by the damp, or perhaps by the island itself. The storm abated as quickly as it had begun. Dawn broke, pale and weak, over a calm sea. Weeks later, a police boat, summoned by the continued absence of the Rosses, found him. Antonio was sitting on the arch of the bridge, staring blankly at the water below. He was emaciated, his hair turned white, his eyes devoid of any recognizable human emotion. He was humming a tuneless nursery rhyme, over and over again. When they tried to lead him away, he didn't resist. He just kept humming. He was committed to a psychiatric hospital on the mainland. He never spoke another word. He would spend his days sitting by a window, staring out at the sea, towards the silhouette of Gaiola. Sometimes, he would smile a faint, terrible smile. The orderlies said it was the medication. But the old ones in the village knew better. They said he was listening. They said he was waiting. The island was put up for sale again. The price was even lower this time. It stood empty for a year, then two. The story of the Rosses became just another layer of tragedy, another verse in the island's grim ballad. Then, a new prospect arrived. An American tech billionaire, young, arrogant, and dismissive of what he called old-world superstition. He saw not a cursed rock, but a unique investment opportunity, a trophy property. His name was Jason Croft. He stood on the very same shore where Antonio had stood 2 years before, a triumphant smile on his face as he looked at the island through his high-tech sunglasses. His fiancée, a vibrant woman named Chloe, stood beside him, her phone held up to capture the scene for her social media followers. "Can you believe it, babe?" Jason said, slinging an arm around her. "Our own private island. We'll rip all that creepy old stuff out, make it smart, sustainable. A paradise." Chloe laughed, a bright, sparkling sound. "It's so romantic. And so spooky. The cursed island, dot." She said it with air quotes, her eyes twinkling. "We'll have to have a huge Halloween party here." On the high arch of the bridge connecting the two parts of Gaiola, a movement caught Jason's eye. He lowered his sunglasses. For a split second, he thought he saw a man standing there, a gaunt, pale figure with white hair, staring back at him. He blinked, and the figure was gone. Must be a trick of the light, he thought, shaking his head. Just a shadow. He turned back to Chloe, his smile returning, wider than ever. "A paradise," he repeated, the word tasting like ash and salt on the wind. Below the bridge, in the deep, dark channel, something stirred. Something old, and hungry, and patient. It had been waiting. And now, the feast was about to begin again.